Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that the words, "So help me God," are not part of the presidential oath? And that using a Bible to take the presidential oath of office is an individual choice. Join us as we witness the same oath of office that has been repeated since 1884 to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America.
One of the most familiar, yet I think most misunderstood ceremonies in American democracy. The U.S. presidential inauguration, we all know the iconic images, right? The swearing in, the speech.
The parade.
Exactly, the parade. And it feels like this moment that's just dripping in ancient tradition. Yet when you really pull back the curtain on the sources we've gathered, you find this incredible constant tension. A tension between what the Constitution requires and then all of the deeply personal and sometimes surprising choices that have shaped this tradition for over 2 centuries. So our mission today is really a shortcut to being well-informed on this. We're going to dissect the legal backbone, specifically the 20th Amendment. Then we'll compare the fascinating legal differences between the presidential and the vice presidential oaths.
Which are huge.
And finally, look at how these traditions, everything from swearing on a book of law to, using a Catholic missal, how they define the weight of this office.
And this dive is particularly useful for you, the learner, because the inauguration is really the ultimate public performance where law, faith, and history all converge. We're going to show you exactly where the Constitution draws a hard, undeniable line, what is absolutely mandatory,
Right.
and then where personal faith and, historical custom just take over, influencing the highest office in the land. It's a powerful study in how the strict rule of law has to contend with, 2 centuries of human tradition.
Let's start with a fact that really surprised me, and it shows just how fluid these traditions once were. The modern inauguration date, January 20th, is surprisingly new.
It is.
The first U.S. presidential inauguration to actually take place on January 20th was Franklin D. Roosevelt's second term.
In 1937.
In 1937.
That's right. When you look at the first century and a half of the Republic, the official date was March 4th.
March 4th.
Yeah, which meant there was this massive 4-month gap between the November election and the spring swearing in.
4 months seems like an administrative lifetime, especially today. Why on earth did they wait that long?
Well, it wasn't laziness. It was pure 18th century logistics. The sources all point out that March 4th was chosen because of the sheer time people needed to travel to the Capitol.
Which was difficult back then.
Oh, arduous and slow. And then there was the time required for a new administration to actually wind down the old and set up the new. You have to remember, roads were terrible, communication was slow, results took time to certify. They just needed that 4-month cushion.
But the big downside of that cushion was the famous lame duck problem.
Precisely. That 4-month gap meant that an outgoing president and Congress, who had been, explicitly rejected by the voters, were still running the country.
Making decisions, passing laws.
Exactly. And this became politically intolerable, especially during crises like the Great Depression. The feeling was, if the nation needs a new direction, why should it have to wait 4 months to get going?
So, enter the legislative fix. Congress passed the 20th Amendment in 1932, and it was formally ratified in 1935. This was, I guess, the final legislative acknowledgement that the world had sped up.
Yeah, and the government needed to respond faster to the will of the voters. And what's fascinating about the 20th Amendment is how incredibly specific it is about the mechanics of this transition. It really ends the ambiguity.
It's not just changing the date.
No, it's a constitutional clock setter. Section I dictates explicitly that the terms of the president and vice president end at noon on the 20th day of January. But it also covers the legislative branch, making sure the entire government turns over together.
So it says their terms, senators, representatives, end on January 3rd.
At noon on the 3rd, which means the new members of Congress start their session immediately. The legislative branch is up and running almost 3 weeks before the executive.
Okay.
Section 2 confirms this, setting the new start date for Congress on January 3rd. But there is one more critical and I think often overlooked detail embedded in this amendment.
What's it?
It resolved a major historical uncertainty. The 20th Amendment also clearly defines that the vice president is next in succession if the president-elect dies before taking office.
Wow, so before 1935, that was a gray area.
A huge gray area. This amendment ensured an orderly transition, even if tragedy struck between November and January.
That legal clarity about the date really sets the stage for the big moment, taking the oath of office. We tend to focus just on the president, but the vice president-elect is actually sworn in first.
That's right.
And the differences in the oaths themselves are incredibly revealing about, well, the nature of power in Washington.
They really are. The vice president's oath is the same oath that has been in use since 1884. And this is crucial. It is the identical oath taken by every single senator, representative, federal employee, and military officer.
So it's the standard loyalty oath for the whole federal workforce.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that immediately links the vice president to the entire functioning government, not just the executive branch.
So what does that common oath actually mandate?
The language is expansive, and it's deeply focused on loyalty and defense. The key lines are, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That phrase, all enemies, foreign and domestic, has always stood out to me. It's such an aggressive, defensive posture.
It is. It defines the job as one of active protection against both external and internal threats to the system.
Okay, so now when we shift focus to the president-elect's oath, which is mandated directly by Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, the language changes.
It changes in a way that shifts the focus from defending the system to defining the office. The text is actually much shorter.
Right. It's just, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
See the difference?
Yes, the president does not swear to defend against foreign and domestic enemies. They swear to two different things: to execute the office and to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution itself. What's the implication there?
Well, this is a crucial distinction, and it connects back to the broader implications for you, the learner, about the separation of powers.
How so?
The first part, faithfully execute the office of president, is arguably the most powerful phrase in the oath. It connects directly to the Article 2 vesting clause, which grants the executive power. When the president swears to execute the office, they're swearing to administer the laws passed by Congress.
So they're swearing to do the job.
To do the job is defined by law. It's the operational promise that allows for the implementation of policy, executive orders, the whole functioning of government.
So if the VP is promising loyalty and defense like the military, the president is promising stewardship and execution.
Exactly. And the second part reinforces that stewardship role. The president vows to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. The object is the document itself, the foundational framework.
Not just defending the system from threats.
Right. It's a higher constitutional promise. It's about maintaining the integrity of the republic, not just fighting its battles. So the oaths aren't just slightly different wording. They define two fundamentally distinct constitutional responsibilities.
That legal distinction sets the stage for the big moment. But when we look at the actual swearing in, that's where the personalization really begins. This is where custom and individual choice kind of take over.
Mm-hmm.
The most famous example has to be the 4 words traditionally added at the very end. So help me God.
And we absolutely have to emphasize this. Those 4 words are not part of the presidential oath laid out in the Constitution.
Not required at all.
Nope. No religious affirmation is required. They are a deeply personal, individual choice made by the president-elect to acknowledge faith in that moment.
And that tradition goes way back. George Washington is widely reported to have added the phrase when he took his oath.
Abraham Lincoln also confirmed adding it in 1865. And since then, most, but certainly not all, U.S. presidents have included it. It's really transformed a constitutional mandate into a kind of spiritual ritual.
And the choice of book is equally symbolic and also not constitutionally required. Most use a Bible, but even that is often customized. Presidents choose family Bibles or specific translations.
Or even stacking 2 Bibles, like Barack Obama did with one used by Lincoln and another used by Martin Luther King Jr.
But the truly fascinating aha moments are when a president-elect makes a choice that deviates completely from that norm. It sends a very clear political message.
Like John Quincy Adams in 1825. He chose to swear his oath on a book of law. He specifically intended to place his hand on the U.S. Constitution itself.
This was a clear statement.
A huge political statement, declaring to the public that his primary allegiance was not to any religious doctrine, but directly to the founding legal document. That was radical at the time.
Theodore Roosevelt also deviated. He didn't use a Bible at all when he took the oath in 1901 after McKinley's assassination.
Right, but the circumstances there were just chaotic. The focus was on getting the legal requirement met as quickly as possible to ensure stability.
And then there's maybe the most unique case of all, Lyndon B. Johnson.
Who, aboard Air Force One.
After the assassination of President Kennedy, in that urgent, improvised setting, no Bible was immediately available. So he took the oath using a missal.
A book containing texts from the Roman Catholic Mass.
Right, that belonged to a White House aide. It just perfectly highlights how circumstance often dictates the ritual, but the oath itself remains valid because the words, not the book, are the requirement.
And once those mandatory legal requirements are satisfied, the inaugural address follows. And this speech often continues that recognition of divine guidance that we saw in the personalized oath.
It's a transition, really, from the personal commitment of the president to a public vision for the country.
And this isn't just a modern trend. It's a deep rhetorical thread running through the speeches of presidents, regardless of their party or era. They consistently acknowledge a source of power or morality that is higher than the government itself.
Let's review some of the historical statements from our sources that illustrate this. It shows the varying context, but the conviction is very similar.
Okay, so in the middle of World War II, Franklin D. Roosevelt, in 1945, he said that the Almighty God had blessed the land and provided a faith that is the hope of all peoples in an anguished world. It was a plea for resilience, framed in divine terms.
Then 4 years later, start of the Cold War, 1949, President Truman stated that the American people stand firm in the faith that inspired the nation, basing it on the belief that all men are created equal because they are created in the image of God.
He used that faith as a clear line against the totalitarian threats of the era. And even a politician famous for pragmatism, John F. Kennedy, in 1961, argued that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God.
A profound contrast between Western ideals and communist atheism at the height of the Soviet threat.
Absolutely.
And jumping ahead, Ronald Reagan, in 1981, affirmed, "We are a nation under God." And he even suggested that Inauguration Day should be declared a day of prayer.
Right, directly linking the transition of power to a moment of national religious observance. And this consistency just shows how deeply intertwined the recognition of divine guidance is with the country's official narrative. It's a constitutional transfer of power, but it's also a spiritual commitment reflected in traditions like the Pledge of Allegiance.
To one nation under God.
Whether it's added by personal choice or woven into public policy.
Okay, before we move to our final synthesis, let's transition into some quick, fascinating historical details from our sources. These are the anecdotes that really give color to the law.
I love this part because it really shows the gap between the pomp we see today and the humble beginnings of the Republic.
Start with Thomas Jefferson. When he was inaugurated, he famously walked to the ceremony from a boarding house.
In plain clothes.
Wearing the plain clothes of a citizen, no distinction. That was such a powerful, deliberate statement against the monarchical pomp of European courts.
It established a Republican austerity that really defined the early days. And here's another fascinating one, involving music. The Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square performed for the first time for President William Howard Taft in 1911.
And they've performed for so many since then. Johnson, Nixon, Reagan, both Bushes, Trump.
It shows this recurring effort to integrate different cultural and regional touchstones into the national ceremony.
On the media front, Truman's inauguration has the distinction of being the first one ever televised, 1949.
And just like that, the ceremony wasn't just for the people on the National Mall. It was a mass media event, instantly ushering in a new age where presidential power was presented directly to millions of citizens in their living rooms.
And let's not forget the party. James Madison hosted the very first inaugural ball.
And his wife, Dolly Madison, holds her own distinction. She was the first president's wife to actually attend an inauguration ceremony, which established a precedent for the First Lady's crucial public role.
In a quick fashion note, top hats were once common, right? Signified the formality. But President John F. Kennedy was the last president to wear one during the actual ceremony in 1961.
Signaling that slow shift toward a slightly more modern, less formal presentation. And finally, there's a quieter tradition that follows all the spectacle.
The prayer service.
Exactly. The newly inaugurated president traditionally attends a prayer service on the first Thursday in February. It involves clergy from many different religions. It contrasts the massive public spectacle with a quiet moment of interfaith reflection.
So if we synthesize all of this, what we see in the inaugural ceremony is this potent, intentional mix of legal rigidity and human flexibility.
That's a great way to put it. You have the hard constitutional law, the required specific wording of the oaths, the fixed date of January 20th, and then you have the deeply personal evolving tradition.
The choice of book, the added religious affirmation, the historical pageantry.
It's a transition that is both strictly defined and completely customized by the individual taking the office.
Which brings us back to where we started, looking at that subtle yet vital difference between the two core oaths. The vice president promises to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Acting as a political defender of the system.
But the president promises to faithfully execute the office and to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution itself.
A different mandate entirely.
So, given that difference, consider this final thought for you to take away. How does that promise to faithfully execute the office actually provide both the foundation and the limits for executive power? And does the president's responsibility to preserve the Constitution mean they must prioritize the foundational legal document over the immediate political needs of the country, or even the immediate desires of the people? It's a critical legal phrase defining the stewardship or restraint of the executive branch, and it's worth mulling over long after the ceremony ends. Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.